I want to welcome you to the December 10th episode of Laid Back History's 2024 Advent Calendar, brought to you by the National Road Heritage Corridor. Let's see what we're looking at today. So on July 9th, 1755, the British forces commanded by General Edward Braddock met the combined forces of the French and the Native Americans on what would become known as Braddock's Field. This was the culmination of the British attempt to remove the French and the Native Americans from the forks of the Ohio, Pittsburgh. They had marched all the way from Cumberland through the wilderness, and when they met in battle that day, it was a swift defeat of the British forces. They were not prepared to fight on the terrain that they had. It was rocky, hilly terrain. It was a lot of trees. And where the French and Native Americans were able to fight from behind trees, behind rocks, the British were not used to that. And so they were defeated. In some cases, there's evidence that they were shot in the back by their own forces because there was so much confusion. Braddock was wounded that day and was carried off the battlefield in the retreat. It was a very hasty retreat back what would become known as Braddock's Road, the road they cut on their way out here to the wilderness. He would die 4 days later on July 13th. It was decided by his men, by Washington, George Washington, who was there with him, to bury Braddock in the middle of the road that they had cut, and then to have the horses, the men, the wagons go over top of that grave. The reason being is that they feared the Native Americans would want to plunder and desecrate the grave, and they didn't want that happening. And so by burying him in the middle of the road and then marching over top of him, they could hide the grave. Well, the retreat occurred, and the burial site was forgotten. It was kind of lost to time. Well, in 1804, there was some improvements being made to Braddock's Road. Braddock's Road was really one of only two roads from the east to the west. And so they were doing some repairs to it in 1804. And while men were digging, they found a grave site. And in the grave, they found a British officer. They could tell by his buttons, his accoutrements. They had found Edward Braddock. And so the body was removed and reburied on a site not far from the road, up on a little bit of a knoll. Now, that wasn't before some of the body parts were taken. There are stories that one of his hands actually made it to a museum in Philadelphia that was later purchased by P.T. Barnum and then moved to New York, where it caught fire, I think in the 1860s, something like that. Caught fire and burned to the ground, and so it was lost. There's also a story that one of his vertebrae is in John Hopkins, I think it was, in their collection, but couldn't substantiate that one. But a local man, after hearing about the finding of the grave, made sure that pretty much everything was put back before he was reburied. And now you can go visit Braddock's grave. In 1913, there was a historical marker put there. There was a nice fence put around the grave. But there is a marker placed on the old Braddock's Road where the original gravesite was that you can go visit down in Fayette County. Because Braddock's Road was the predecessor to what would become the National Road and what would become Route 40. And even the National Road didn't follow completely Braddock's Road. They strayed from it quite a bit as they were building it. And so that section was cut off when they built the National Road, and eventually a marker was put there that you can still see to this day. So the story of General Edward Braddock and his two burial sites. Here's what I want. I want you to join me tomorrow for another episode, but I have ideas all the way through December 21st. So December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. I want your ideas on what the episode should be on. What about the National Road do you want to hear about? What about the National Road don't you know that you want to know? And it could be the history of the National Road. It could be buildings along the National Road. It could be towns along the National Road. I want you to tell me what those 3 episodes should be. So in the comments below, tell me what you want. Or you can email me at info, I-N-F-O, at WCHSPA.net. So that's as in Washington County Historical Society, Pennsylvania.net, WCHSPA.net. Email me and let me know, or leave it in the comments. I have a special episode planned for December 25th. I always do something a little more personal, which I'm going to do on December 25th. But for the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, for those 3 episodes, I may have said 21st through 24th, but whatever. For those 3 episodes, I want you to tell me what you'd like to hear about. So I will see you tomorrow for an all-new episode of Laid Back History's 2024 Advent Calendar.